Can you hear me?
Hi, Joe. I can hear you.
All right.
All set up now?
Trying to be.
Do you have your computer speakers turned all the way down?
Yeah. The presentation seems to be frozen. Can you still hear me?
Joe, we can hear you, but there's a little bit of an echo. Do you have your
How about now?
That's better.
Yeah, for some reason it was frozen. The presentation, the Adobe Present was frozen, so.
Okay, so I know we've been working through some audio issues. I just want to check one more time with all our speakers before we get started. Joe, can you unmute your line and let me know you can hear me?
Okay.
And how about Bill? Do we have you as well?
You do? I'm here.
And Craig?
You betcha.
Great. If the three of you can now mute your phone lines, we'll get started. Thank you, guys. So for everyone else, welcome to the Safety Center's August webinar on collaborating with law enforcement to reach zero. My name is Jamie Sullivan, and I'm the manager for the Safety Center. We're going to go ahead and close out all of these polls and let you know some results. It looks like today we have a very good representation from across the country. We have about 35% of you from the West, about 25% from the Northeast, 20% from Southeast, about 14% from the Midwest, and 8% from elsewhere. We have, again, a pretty good cross-representation of organizations as well. It looks like the majority of you, about 23%, are from local transportation departments, about 18% from State Department of Transportation, 12% from the Federal Department of Transportation, 16% from other federal, state, or local government agencies, about 14% from educational institutions, and then a few others represented here. Unfortunately, it looks like we have no one from first response agencies at this time, so hopefully they'll be joining us soon. It does look like most of you are joining us by yourselves, but we do have quite a few of you actually that are joining us in a room with multiple people. So as always, I'm going to ask for those of you who are joining us in rooms with multiple people, if you could please send an email to us at info@ruralsafetycenter.org. Again, that's info@ruralsafetycenter.org, and let us know.
Looks like we've lost Jamie for just a minute, but if you could email her and let her know how many people you have in your room, if you have additional people. Let me make sure we still have audio everywhere. Bill, Craig, and Joe, can you all hear me? Can you speak?
Yep, Joe here.
Okay,
Here.
good. It's just Jamie.
Craig's here.
All right. I'm going to hover for Jamie here for just a moment, and we'll go ahead and move over to our presentation. So today's presentation is collaborating with law enforcement to reach zero. Just to go over a few of the webinar logistics. The webinar will last 90 minutes. It should be over around 10:30 Mountain Time. The webinar will be recorded and it will be archived on our website. If during the presentation, please make sure you have your phones muted. And if you are speaking, then please have your computer speakers turned down. If you want to maximize the presentation on your screen, you can click the 4 arrows that are on the top right corner of the presentation. And at the end of each section, there will be time for Q&A, and we'll run a poll question. There's a handout pod at the bottom right of the screen, and you can download today's presentation as well as some other handouts regarding this presentation today. Let's see. Jamie, are you back up with us?
I am back. Sorry about that, guys. Can everyone hear me now?
We can hear you.
Thank you, and thank you for covering, Dana. It looks like my Wi-Fi went dead. And that was exactly what I was explaining at the time that it went dead, is for any of you who are joining us only by computer, if you do have audio issues, if you wouldn't mind calling in the 866 number that you can be found in the top left of your screen. Sometimes the Wi-Fi signals do go out and then you'll lose audio. So to pick up where Dana was, we also do 2 surveys at the end of each webinar. The first one will come out directly following today's webinar, and that one asks you about the content and the speakers and gets a little feedback from you on our webinars in general. At the end of that survey, you'll be able to check a box as to whether or not you'd like a certificate of completion, and if you'd like to apply for CEUs. And so this is why it's important that we do get everyone's name and email address for those of you who are in a group today. So again, that email address is info@ruralsafetycenter.org to send us names and emails. The second survey we'll send you will be in about 3 months. And the intent of that
Okay, it looks like we may have lost Jamie again for a moment.
Prior to joining MBO Engineering, he was the manager of New Jersey's DOT's Bureau of Safety Program and Crash Records Unit. His background includes the use, development, and improvement of crash data, data systems, and safety programs. Bill has extensive experience with improving integration, uniformity, completeness, access, accuracy, and timeliness of traffic records data across various state and private agency data systems. He also oversaw the creation of New Jersey's data warehouse for the integration of crash, EMS, FARS, and motor vehicle data systems for the state of New Jersey. Bill has been working with police for over a decade on understanding the importance of the NJTR-1 Vehicular Crash Report form and how to improve data collection. Through this association with law enforcement, Bill has gained extensive knowledge of Title 39 of the New Jersey SA Motor Vehicle Code, understanding law enforcement processes and procedures related to gathering and processing data at crash scenes. Our second speaker will be Joseph Weiss. Joseph is a transportation safety analyst at the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation at Rutgers University. There he conducts comprehensive analysis to support decision-making processes and reports on trends seen in motor vehicle crashes in New Jersey. Prior to joining CAIT, Joseph was the operations director for a transportation management association in Northwest New Jersey, where he managed safety program development, community outreach, and engaged engagement efforts. Private sectors. Joseph was the recipient of the Top 40 Under 40 Award from the Association of Commuter Transportation for his professional achievements and dedication to transportation alternatives. Lastly, we have Craig Allred. Craig Allred is a transportation specialist assigned to the FHWA Resource Center on the Safety and Design team, working with road safety audits, designing and planning for pedestrian safety, automated enforcement, speed management, ITS and safety, and older drivers. Craig has conducted over 650 RSAs and/or workshops during the past 12 years. Craig has presented in 50 states and territories and in several countries across the world. He has worked in the Office of Safety and in Intelligent Transportation Systems, Joint Program Offices, as the Public Safety Coordinator. Previously, Craig served in law enforcement for 25 years before retiring. During his law enforcement career, he served in the Training Division, headed a national program of increasing law enforcement use and enforcement of occupant protective devices, and as the director in the Utah Department of Public Safety. Craig has been a member of and involved in the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the Highway Safety Committee since 1991. And it does sound like I may have cut out in between a few of the bios, so I will upload those to the handout section as well, in case some of you were unable to hear everything that I said. I just want to check, Dana, are you able to hear me again?
Yes, you're back up and good.
Okay. So the goals of the webinar: once you have completed this webinar, you will have an overview of the ways that transportation agencies can work with law enforcement to assist with efforts to reach zero fatalities. Law enforcement is a key safety stakeholder, and efforts by both law enforcement and officials and transportation practitioners would be even more effective through coordination and collaboration. Our learning outcomes for today, there are 4 of them. The first one is to restate the idea of Towards Zero Deaths and Road to Zero. The second is to summarize the importance of law enforcement and crash reporting. The third is to illustrate how to incorporate law enforcement into the planning process. And the fourth is to identify collaboration opportunities for public awareness. And at this point in time, I am going to make sure Bill can speak, and I'm hoping that I am the only one that's having communication issues today. But Bill, are you able to?
I am here and ready to go.
Perfect. So I'm going to turn this over to you now then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. As you were said, my name is Bill Beans, and I'm up to 15 years working with law enforcement. I'm also right now an NCHRP 1664 on drafting the documents, national documents for guidance on Towards Zero Deaths. So working on that currently. So what I want to do is just start off and give you an idea of Towards Zero Deaths. We have zero deaths. We have Vision Zero. Where did this all come about? Who's the players and what's out there? So right now, the United States Department of Transportation has a strategic plan, and it articulates a goal of working toward no fatalities at all. And so that is where it all began. And underneath the Department of Transportation, they have transit, maritime, aviation, railroad, research and technology, as well as, which we all know, FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration. So FHWA, with the prompting of DOT's goal of working toward no fatalities, has adopted and made a commitment to the vision of eliminating fatalities and serious injuries. Now, FHWA has 3 agencies under them: Office of Safety, Office of Safety Research and Development, and a Resource Center for Safety and Design Technical Services team. And those 3 have come together under the umbrella of FHWA, and they have established a strategic plan which focuses a commonality on that is safety, a safety vision. And if you go to FHWA's website, it just says zero. So their goal is zero. So if you see that, now you know where that came from, FHWA. Now, FHWA administers a Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP. And under that Highway Safety Improvement, to better the safety on our highways, they require that each state develops a strategic highway safety plan, SHSP. Now, under that, let me turn the slide. Hold on, my apologies. Towards zero deaths. So now what happens is under FHWA's umbrella, they have a steering committee, and you can see the little symbols here. You have AASHTO and GHSA, and you have these this committee developed of these agencies that have come together, and in June of 2014 published the document Toward Zero Deaths. And so that's how we get TZD today. Again, this is a group, a collaborative effort between these 8 agencies to develop this strategy towards zero deaths to help states address fatalities and injuries. The national strategy is intended to unite safety stakeholders, motivate partners to reinforce partnerships, increase collaboration, which we're going to talk about, create new opportunities, and focus aggressively on reaching towards zero deaths. Now, in this document here, TZD, they highlight key initiatives that stakeholders must prioritize. They stress the need for aggressive approach to developing long-term strategies. And of course, they offer initiatives and some ideas of initiatives that would give you maybe the most dramatic reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. They talk about growth concerns, and they discuss the need for changing traffic safety culture, which I'm going to talk about coming up. So under this TZD and FHWA's Highway Safety Improvement Program that mandates the state develop, each state in the country develop a strategic highway safety plan. And so here, the strategic highway safety plan, that's the cover for New Jersey, because that's where I live. They require to receive your highway safety improvement funding, you're required then to implement TZD. It has to be data-driven, comprehensive, multidisciplinary. And so there's these guidelines that the feds have implemented, FHWA, sorry, toward improving the highway system. So you got zero, and you got towards zero deaths, and now we see there's what is called Road to Zero. So Road to Zero. Now, FHWA, and I mentioned there are 3 offices under that umbrella that put together a committee of 8 agencies to get TZD. In addition, FHWA, through National Highway Traffic Safety Association, NHTSA, Federal Motor Carriers, and FHWA all have come together and work now with another agency, National Safety Council. National Safety Council is a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. They actually were established back in 1913, and their members include 55,000 businesses, labor organizations, schools, public agencies, private agencies. And they want to work toward Road to Zero, getting fatalities down to zero. So it's a national coalition, representatives from roadway, behavior, vehicle safety, nonprofit groups, and even some public health organizations and technology companies. So you see a shift from FHWA, DOT, working with the states on their plan to Road to Zero, where the federal government partnering up and helping this nonprofit organization, National Safety Council, to work on another level, down on another level, working with different groups, safety organizations that are interested in safety. So in October of 2015, only 2 years ago, they announced the Road to Zero initiative, and its aim is to eliminate traffic fatalities in 30 years. And so there you have Road to Zero. Now, the National Safety Council offers and dedicates $1 million over a 3-year period to help, again, organizations, traffic organizations, be able to implement some programs that they develop on a lower level than just the state level in addressing safety on our roadways. So that's very good. Now, they're looking to expand their membership. So if you're some agency out there that feels you want to get involved, you could contact National Safety Council, because they're looking to expand their membership. promote behavioral change strategies, which we're going to talk about coming up. And, they want to be more involved, more intensely involved. One of their big pushes and focus is the scenario of strategic deployment of self-driving cars. And so they're really focused. That's one of their focus areas that they're focusing on. There's still another one. The next one is Vision Zero Network. Now, this really came out of Europe. Vision Zero Network came out of Sweden, actually in the 1990s, so they were ahead of the curve here. And they're based on no loss of life is acceptable. That's their mantra, I guess you could say. Again, it's a collaborative campaign like all the other ones. You see all the agencies involved. This one also is a collaborative campaign bringing together local leaders on a lower level, city level, traffic engineers, police enforcement, policy advocates, and developing strategies on a city level. Now, they formally were adopted in 1997. And since 1997, they were averaging over in Sweden about 7 fatalities per every 100,000 people population. Today, they're down to 3. So they've reduced from 7 to 3. The U.S. is 11.3 fatals per 100,000. So you can see we have a long way to go in addressing fatalities on our roadway. This is just a map that shows you some of the cities that are embracing Vision Zero in America. Now, there's common themes between all three. All three are looking towards zero deaths and Vision Zero, Road Zero. They're all looking to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. You heard collaboration come out already, coordinated efforts, multidisciplinary, data-driven. That's the common themes. The differences, TDZ started way up the state highway, strategic highway safety plan with USDOT and that big umbrella FHWA all the way down to the states. Road to Zero is National Safety Council, nonprofit, non-governmental agency working and pushing it down, lower down into the communities. And you have Vision Zero, which is embraced as a city-focused, nonprofit supported agency. So that's the difference. Now, what I would like to do is shift, because now you've got a little history of towards zero deaths and where we're trying to go. I want to talk a little bit about collaboration. And so when I think about collaboration and law enforcement, because we're here to talk about how to incorporate, integrate, work with law enforcement. I train law enforcement every year. In New Jersey, we've got about 539 police departments. This year, I had contact with 250 some of them. So half of them were in the training sessions with me as I was talking to them about how to improve the way they do business and to be a collaboration. So for instance, I always start up the training session. I say, what is the crash report for? What's the main purpose of the crash report? Over 95%, probably closer to 99% of the police officers say it's an insurance report form for liability litigation. And then I go on to tell them a lot more than that. So you could take some of the principles that I use to change the way they think about the job they're doing. If 99% thinks it's nothing more than a legal document, then their heart is not into the concept that it's more than that, and it's about, getting down towards zero deaths and fatalities. So one of the things I present to them is I talk about the fact that it is a collaborative, they're one component of a collaboration of players in the world of safety. For instance, law enforcement is one component, and they provide the law for the operation of the highway system. They deal with consequences and behaviors, and they look at safety on a highway system from that angle. Somebody gets a ticket, hopefully it modifies their behavior. Whereas the engineers are another component to that same team looking at the highway system, but the engineers are looking at the actual physical structure. And then we talk about education, which looks at potential future users and current users of the highway system and how to educate them and inform them and give them a knowledge so that they can make informed decisions about how they interact with that highway system. And of course, EMS looks at the right time safety of the current operating system and interacting with getting people on and off that happen to get involved in crashes on that system and how they get them on and off, a very key component. So the officers make up one of a component of players, and I teach them that, which helps. And the way I do that is this. I start off a training session. I say, look, here's a chart with fatalities. Fatalities in the country, 30-some thousand fatalities a year. Well, look at how many murders. We're at about 12,000 countrywide. So you're 200% more likely to die on your roadway system than being murdered. And so I showed them that their job is very important, and it's key and critical to understand that their job is not a lesser than job than anybody else when it comes to on that highway system and filling out that crash report form and getting that data. I turn around and I show them charts, like the leading cause of death in the country, motor vehicle fatalities at the top, and I showed them where murders are. So this just brings it home to them that it is critical that they understand their part to the team. Now, what I turn around is I make it personal. I turn around and say most likely their children, if their children are going to die, they're going to die on our roadway system. Oh, I don't know why that went ahead. Their children are going to die on the roadway system, not choking, not drowning, not murder, not electrocution, but on a roadway system. And that brings it home to them. I turn around and I say, who's all the end users? And I show them all the end users that's using the crash. I talk about all the programs we're running in the state, and you guys would talk about all the programs that you're running in your state and show them who are the players, the safety programs, what you're addressing. This begins to get the law enforcement agencies to in their head to understand it's more than an insurance report form. Matter of fact, I put the insurance companies down in the lower right corner, and I tell them that's the least of my concerns, and that's the least of who I really interact with. I really interact with all these other players. I then take, now this is New Jersey's crash report form. It's 3 pages, one on the left, one in the middle, one hidden on the right-hand side. But this is New Jersey's crash report form, 149 fields. And this is what I show them. I said, you see the purple, which you can barely see, but you can see the purple, is DOT fields. That's, the roadway system, crash types, et cetera, et cetera. The green is actually the federal fields that they mostly get from this report, who's using a helmet or not, and the data and information they get. Motor vehicles, the red, which is a few fields, who's the driver. So I tell them, I said, look, in New Jersey, DOT administers a crash report form because we use the majority of the data. Motor vehicle only gets about 13 to 15 fields of 149 fields. So I let them know, here's the players, here's who's using the data. It's not insurance report form as you would like to believe. So I tell them, crash, it's not about an insurance report form. It's about saving lives. I talk about everything that they do is predicated upon the crash report form. All of our grant fundings are from the crash report forms, target enforcements, roadway safety audits, which Craig's going to talk about, engineering improvements, educational programs, and even a strategic plan are all predicated and based upon the crash report form. And I tell them how the federal government monitors every state for that timeliness, completeness, uniformity, accessibility, accuracy, and then I go on for the rest of my training and show them some of the complications that officers and mistakes that officers are doing in a crash report form and shows that they're not meeting these standards or they are meeting these standards and how they can improve the way they're doing business. So that is my presentation, just to give you an overview of TZD. Tell you a little bit of how I'm training police officers to change their safety culture, the way they think about safety and their jobs. So I think that's it. Yep. There's some
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, we do have
Yep, go ahead.
a few slides in here for additional resources, and again, you can download a copy of today's presentation in the PDF version in the handout section so that you will have access to those links for additional resources. We provide you with the websites for a few of the programs that were spoken about, including Towards Zero Deaths, Vision Zero, and then there are a couple of links to previous Safety Center webinars that have gone on that relate to topics that were just spoken about. So at this point, we are open for questions, and again, because your phone lines are muted, we will ask you to type anything that you'd like to ask into the chat pod, and we will ask those of our speaker. While we are waiting, I am going to move over to the first poll break. You will notice that the chat pod will remain in that poll break so that you can continue typing. So our first poll question that we have for you today is, which of the following is not a difference between the 3-0 programs? The partners are different, the emphasis areas are different, focus on different techniques, grant funding, the main goal is different, or I don't know, I don't remember. So again, which of the following is not a difference? We'll give everyone a couple more minutes to fill it out. Looks like we have still quite a bit of movement going on. Okay, looks like at this point everyone has answered. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and broadcast the results for you. And you should be able to see those at this time, Bill.
Yes, I do see them. Would you like me to comment on them?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the not a difference is the fatalities are preventable. Everybody's looking to reduce fatalities, eliminate fatalities. The other ones are important also, but that's when it's not the difference. Everybody, all the Vision Zeros is about that. Vision Zero fatalities are preventable.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to move us back over to the presentation now. And the one question we did receive was whether or not the links will be included in the archives. And yes, when we do post this on our website, all of the handouts are available in that archive, as well as the streaming video you can watch as well and see those links too. So everything will be available still. And now I am going to turn the presentation over to Joseph.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so as James said, my name is Joseph Weiss. I'm a transportation safety analyst at Rutgers University. Majority of my efforts supports the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety offices. The past 4 years, I've kind of dedicated my efforts to assisting the law enforcement community. We promote safety behavior, we use data-driven analysis to target appropriate enforcement strategies to ultimately reduce roadway fatalities. Today I'm going to kind of go over a few areas pertaining to data, the fun stuff, at least in my opinion, mostly crash data. I'm going to talk about some other relationships with crash data. We're going to talk about the importance of data for data-driven decisions, why data quality is important, some of the challenges that the law enforcement community faces when they're collecting this data, as well as some of the opportunities available to them by collecting such valuable information. I'm going to go over some of the ways we use crash data to assist the community, law enforcement community, in developing their operating procedures. Ultimately, the police officers are the boots on the ground. They're the first in line when it comes to capturing data pertaining to motor vehicle crashes. They play one of the most important roles when it comes to documenting the crash circumstances. Without their diligence and expertise in the field, our jobs as safety professionals is much more difficult. So let's dive into it here. All right, so why is data important? Data important ultimately is helps us drive our decision-making processes. There's a multitude of users that use crash data. We have engineers. They look at data systemically to determine appropriate crash modification factors and maybe do target highway safety improvement project locations as examples. State DOTs, MPOs, they use crash data to set their performance targets, measure safety performance, and ultimately tracking the progress made in reducing fatalities and serious injuries on the roads. Planners use data to determine better applications for roadway designs, how to mitigate conflict points, including those between motorized and non-motorized users of the road. Healthcare professionals, they look at crash data to focus on injury severities. They focus on, for example, maybe seating positions and safety equipment that was used at the crash, see if maybe there's a correlation between the two. Safety organizations, private and public safety organizations, use crash data to determine better ways to make our cars safer to travel in, how to reduce severities if one does get into a collision. They also look at behavioral patterns that we see in crashes, such as distracted driving and speeding. An example in New Jersey here, we work with the New Jersey Brain Injury Alliance. We help them understand issues behind teen driving crashes. They have a number of education programs where they go into high schools and they teach teens some of the factors involved in teen-related crashes. We try to do some analysis to see if any of their education has had any impact on that community. We work with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, same thing, to use crash data to help understand issues behind impaired driving crashes. The New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition, we use data for to kind of understand issues associated with ped and bike crashes, where they're happening, how to prevent them from happening. And hospitals, to touch on healthcare industry in New Jersey, they look at the age occupants, where they're sitting in the car, whether or not they're wearing their seatbelts, airbag deployment, and they like to marry the crash data with EMS data, triage data, to see if there's ways that they can improve their ability to provide care. But today, we're focusing on some law enforcement initiatives on how they use crash data. They use it for a number of reasons. Some examples would be grant funding, right? We need good summarized data to justify funding needs for enforcement grants. There's a number of opportunities to receive grants for enforcement initiatives from the highway safety offices, DUI and impaired driving enforcement, pedestrian safety enforcement, click it or ticket campaigns, child passenger safety education, distracted driving enforcement initiatives, and a number more. There's also opportunities to obtain funding for drug recognition expert training or DRE trainings, maybe to purchase speed detection equipment, as well as help target their media and marketing messages aimed at educating motorists and non-motorists. We also use crash data for safety performance measuring. We evaluate the effectiveness of all the aforementioned funded efforts. With good crash data, we can analyze, for example, if our DUI enforcement initiatives have actually led to a reduction in drunk driving crashes, or if our ped and bike education efforts have kind of led to those types of crashes. Knowing the effect of safety enforcement really helps us determine our best practices and strategies that work, or in some cases, they don't work. We also use good data to target our safety enforcement. Right? It helps, using good data, it tells us a little bit more about a particular phenomenon. This will stick with drunk driving here. Sure, you can look at the overall numbers of alcohol-involved crashes. You can see what, if any, roles alcohol plays in crash circumstances. We can track the overall fatalities, how many people were injured. We can compare numbers from this year to last year. We can look at trends to see if we're going in the right direction. But ultimately, how do we reduce those numbers altogether, right? We need to massage data to understand it better, to understand the effects alcohol has in crashes and crash cases. We might want to look at some of the top problem areas or hotspots where alcohol crashes are taking place. We can look at some of the temporal parameters involved in those crashes, right? So what days of week, month of year, time of day, when are these crashes occurring, right? Looking for drunk drivers at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, though they may be present, might not be the best use of our resources, right? That gets into data quality. Why is data quality important, right? I mean, we all know the saying, kind of garbage in is garbage out. Without good data, we can't produce good information. I couldn't tell you how many times I've come across reckless driving spelled with a W. I couldn't, we probably have about 4 different iterations of different street names. Is it JFK Boulevard? Is it JFK BLVD? Is it John F. K Boulevard? And so on. Some rare cases, towns stop sending in crashes, so we don't even have those crash events in our statewide database. So like I said, if we don't have the information to use, it's hard to help target our enforcement efforts. Data quality is important to help us understand the problems on the road. Making sure reports are filled out correctly and as complete as possible is definitely the most important factor. Making sure the time was written down at 5:54 p.m. instead of just 5 o'clock really makes a big difference. Where a person was sitting in the car, if they weren't wearing their seatbelt. This is all very valuable information to have and important to communicate to the law enforcement community to try to collect that data as best they can. Data quality is important to help us adjust our safety strategies. If we don't collect precise data on our contributing circumstances or pre-crash actions, it makes it really difficult to see if our safety efforts are actually working, or even to justify the dollars that we've been spending have been well spent. If we can see if an effort is working or not working, we can kind of adjust how we provide our outreach, help adjust our educational messages, maybe target different crowds or groups of individuals. Another reason why data quality is important, to be a horse here, is targeted enforcement. Having clear data, helps us not only identify the areas of where alcohol-involved crashes are happening, to keep the same example, but we can target what roadways would be the best places to set up DUI checkpoints or pedestrian decoy locations. Looking at those hotspot locations for a particular phenomena helps us target the types of enforcement strategies needed to mitigate those types of crashes. But most importantly, having good data quality really helps us monitor our safety performance, right? So states have to follow the safety performance management rule, which means collecting and tracking 5 different performance measurement areas, 3 included for NHTSA. So that supports policy decisions. It helps direct investments to achieve our performance goals. There's 5 different areas, like I mentioned: total number of fatalities, fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMTs, total number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 VMTs, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries, so our bikes and PEDs. The Safety Performance Management Rule establishes the process for state DOTs and MPOs to establish and report on their safety targets. It's also the process that FHWA uses to assess whether or not state DOTs have met or made considerable progress towards achieving those targets. So not having good quality data really, kind of puts a hamper on our ability to set proper targets, accurate targets, and ultimately in measuring the effectiveness of our safety programs. Now, so let's talk about some of the challenges. There we go. Oh, get the slide. Seem to be missing a slide here. Let's talk about some of the challenges that law enforcement community faces in collecting data, right? So police they're more than just data collectors. When a crash occurs, they're dispatched to the scene. They might not have much information other than where they're heading. When they arrive, they have to stop moving cars, stabilize the traffic way, sometimes in both directions. They have to attend to the victims of the crash, assess injuries, determine how severe they may be. They have to determine if they need any additional support. Do they need fire trucks, ambulance, paramedics? Do they need to coordinate medical evacuations? Was there a hazmat spill? Do they need a crime scene investigation if there was malicious intent or a fatality involved? Do they need to call a medical examiner? If the roadway is completely impassable or clearance is needed for auxiliary support, they have to now contact DOT for lane closures, assist in kind of securing the scene. They might need to call out a structural engineer if there was a car fire under an overpass, then they need to make sure that the bridge is structurally sound before they can open up these roadways. About that time when they start filling out the crash report, right? And so you have, they're tasked with the job to fill out as much information they can on our police accident reports. And a lot of times, crash circumstances are very clear cut. You have your minor fender benders, or very minor or no injuries, only property damage only crashes where all of the parties involved have the ability to communicate. The crash could have been, taken place outside of the roadway or on private property, so it doesn't really pose a risk to other motorists or the flow of traffic. But sometimes, crashes are way more complicated and way more severe. The injuries sustained were way more severe, and it's difficult to obtain that information. Occupants might not be able to communicate. They might be seriously injured, and the need for medical assistance takes precedence over collecting their date of birth. It might have been a hit-and-run scenario, So an investigative follow-up has to ensue. That might include several vehicles, and determining the cause kind of becomes difficult to assess. It's pretty rare for cars to have dash cam footage of what exactly happened during the crash. So a lot of times the officers have to rely on witness accounts, and those witness accounts can conflict with one another. So who's speaking the truth, or what causation factors really took place. Sometimes crashes are really difficult to interpret. So there's a crash event takes place, and they have these boxes to check and fill out, and then to kind of fill in. But that form might not offer the best choices for them to describe what actually took place. What was the most harmful event? How many? Which was vehicle 1 or 2 or 3? Sometimes an officer is completing a report. They actually fill out the report in their vehicle some distance away from the actual crash location. So the latitude and longitude point is actually entered in a wrong location. Sometimes the officer collects information that he or she needs at the scene, writes it down, takes some notes to fill out the report at a later date, and may kind of lose some of those intimate details that they would need to fill out the report in the most complete manner. There's a couple of tips and tricks at the current slide here on how to overcome some of those challenges, right? So in New Jersey, we have a couple different ways to overcome some of these challenges. We offer a variety of training materials that benefit our first responders, as well as kind of giving them information on how to collect the right information. We just released a new police accident report. We call it the NJTR1 here. And we also created an informational guidebook that provides like a whole slew of definitions that kind of gives clarification on how to collect information, offers definitions for different crash types, the sequence of events, contributing circumstances, pre-crash actions, some of the areas that would need further clarification on an officer's behalf. We also help them identify vehicle types, cargo bodies, how to read hazmat plates. We instruct them on how to collect driver license information, how to document restrictions, endorsements a driver might have, especially those with out-of-state licenses. We also have police accident report training classes where we have a retired state trooper, an active state trooper, and Bill Beans, actually on the call here, retired manager of DOT safety programs. They travel around the state. We hold classes, about 12 of them, for about 40 officers at a time. We go over the basics of crash reporting. We answer all the questions that they may have on how to fill out the crash report. Bill goes over the importance of collecting high-quality data and that it isn't just for insurance purposes. They shows them, basically the real reasons, some of the other reasons behind why collecting this information matters. It's more, like I said, more than just for insurance purposes. And overall, it's a good program. It offers face-to-face instruction, gives examples, and definitely a learning experience for all, including the trainers. Lastly, we created a web-based training. I provided a few slides as a PDF in some of the handout section, but it goes over each and every field in the crash report. So we issue this web-based training on a flash drive, and so folks can kind of take it back to their department and continue to have that resource. They can circulate it amongst the ranks. It's engaging for brand new officers that don't even know what the police accident report is or does, but it also serves as a refresher for some of our more veteran officers that might just need a kind of a recap of maybe some of the changes that were made to the report, or just like I said, a refresher of what are those crash types again. We even offer quizzes for each of the sections and an overall test that if one passes, they get a certification. They can even put their name on it. One of the things we've learned is that officers, they love competition. So we try to deliver it in a format where they can compete sort of for bragging rights, but it does require them to have more than a basic understanding of what's in the crash report. But they could take the test and see who passes versus the other. We also offer program support through a couple other different formats. We conduct crash analyses for police departments. We aid them in determining the issues that they face on their roadways. We can run analyses on specific regions, locate the most problematic intersections, identify optimal times to conduct safety enforcement. We also look at their funded programs to see if they're working, such as an example would be the Safe Corridors program, where they are looking for driver inattention, aggressive driving, speed-related behaviors, and we look at the crashes that have ensued on those corridors to see if our high visibility enforcement strategies have been working. We also create crash reports and summarize crashes. We work with municipalities, counties, safety agencies, the police departments. We break down circumstances to kind of tell a story. They can disseminate these reports throughout the police department as well as the community. So it's not just a tool to help target enforcement, but it's also an educational tool for the community. We also do a lot of heat mapping. So I come from a mapping background, and I always say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So not only being able to narrow down on an enforceable initiative, we can create heat maps using the data the officers collect, hopefully high quality data now that they know the importance of that. And we can show them physically on a piece of paper where these problems are occurring. We actually got involved with recently with police departments implementing a DDAX approach, which is data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. I believe Craig is going to be talking about this in a little bit. But basically, we take crash locations, their occurrences, we map them out. We take some of their crime data, some of their Tier 2 crime data, burglary, shoplifting, public intoxication. We overlay them on a map, and many times there's overlapping areas where both crime and crashes are occurring. So we work with the PDs, and we help them kind of target those specific locations to mitigate both crime and motor vehicle crashes through high visibility enforcement. There's a lot of opportunities, right, to overcome some of these challenges. You have some of the training materials, tips, and tricks that I just went over. But in New Jersey, we've learned that kind of performing crash data analysis, helps provide information to these guys that they didn't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So one of the ways we've achieved that is we've launched a tool. We call it the Crash Analysis Tool. It's a powerful analysis tool designed to allow law enforcement agencies to perform high-level analysis on crashes. They can create reports, review data in a streamlined, super easy-to-use platform. They can merge multiple data sets, crash data, occupant, vehicle, pedestrian, roadway data, kind of creates a seamless experience, and they can make their data-driven decisions regarding their roadway safety efforts a little bit easier. It also provides a public portal that allows anyone to view high-level crash data summaries through a means of predetermined charts and graphs, but the tool itself does require a username or one to register for an account. The charts in the tool are completely interactive, so you don't have to know SQL or data to kind of get the most out of it. I have a screenshot here in the slide. You can click anywhere on any of those charts and graphs, and it will adjust all of the other charts and the graphs depending on what it is you've drilled down to or narrowed down to. So it's a super helpful tool. It was actually developed by the Utah Department of Transportation with a company called Numetric out of Utah. It's offered actually as an annual subscription service to any state agency. So if you're interested, I would definitely check them out. We also saw that when users, in this case a traffic safety officer, is trying to pull information from their crash reports, when they can physically see what they've collected, and in some cases the poor quality of the data that they collected, they can kind of put two and two together and, again, understand that the importance of collecting the best quality of data they can will benefit them in the long run. When they look at this map here and they wonder why it only shows about 70% of the crashes that they've filled out, I remind them that, that little Latin long box on your crash report, if you don't fill that out, I can't put it on a map for you. So they want to use these tools, but they can't use it to its full benefit because of the data that they're entering. They try to look for crashes on JFK Boulevard, but when they spell it 4 different ways or 6 different ways, having that uniformity is key, and make sure that when they type in JFK Boulevard, all of those crashes pop up. There's a lot of other different crash clearing systems out there. Like I said, we share the same platform as Utah DOT. A lot of other states have or are looking to subscribe to the same system. I know Connecticut has an unbelievable system that was developed by UConn. Michigan also has a great one developed by Umtree. I believe that there will be links provided with this webinar, so you can kind of check those out as well. Another really notable example is the Tennessee Highway Patrol. They have a system called Titan, which is the not to confuse it with the Tennessee Titans football team, but it's the Tennessee Integrated Traffic Analysis Network. Their system is really, really unique. It aggregates all of the crashes in their system by enforceable circumstances. So they're looking at drunk driving, speeding, head crashes, etc. The unique part about their system is that it's linked to all of their patrol cars, and it shows them in a map format where some of the problems are located. So for instance, it's 11:54 a.m. on a Tuesday, Eastern time at least. An officer, they may be starting his or her shift, they hop into their cruiser, they turn on Titan. Maybe their supervisor told them, they're cracking down on speeding this month, so let's enforce that. They click on a tab in Titan for speeding. Right there on the screen, it shows them a map where all their speed-related crashes and fatalities have occurred on their highway system, but not for all time, for 11:54 a.m. on Tuesdays. They can also look at it in all time, but it really narrows down to the time in which they're accessing the database. So not only do they have a heat map showing them where speeding is an issue, it shows them where speeding has been an issue at 11:54 on Tuesdays, and really helps them target where they should patrol the highway system. I think it's a super powerful tool, helps bring down fatalities on the roadway. Those are some of the examples of the opportunities available to educate and partner with the law enforcement community to help them see their role, how important their role is in collecting this crash data. It benefits all of those users that I went over in the beginning. But at the end of the day, if you can provide them tools and resources for them to use their own data, everyone is going to benefit from that at the end of the day. And that's all I have. So here's some of the additional resources I referred to, a couple of the web links here, so you can check out some of the tools. Like I said, there's a lot more out there that some of the state or nation safety offices have to offer. So these are the ones that I went over briefly today.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Joseph. You'll also notice the very last one does not have a link. And again, this is the one that he mentioned, creating a PDF handout, and it can be found in the handout section in the bottom left of your screen right now. It's called NJTR-1. At this point, we will take questions again, if you have any questions for either Bill or Joseph, and we are going to have one more poll break for you at this time. The chat pod will still be there. And this poll question is, data collected by law enforcement is important because it is used for which of the following? For data-driven planning, grant funding, safety performance measuring, targeted safety enforcement, all of the above, none of the above, or I don't know, don't remember. And we do have at least one question in the chat pod, but I would encourage you, if there are any others, to go ahead and put those in at this time. Okay, and just it looks like everyone has answered the poll. I did broadcast those results if you'd like to address them.
Yeah, so it seems like everyone was picking up what I put down. That all the above is the correct answer here. It's important for them collecting data, helps our data-driven planning, how to apply for grant funding for safety enforcement initiatives, helps us perform, or rather measure our safety performance, whether or not we're meeting those targets, and helps us target where we can enforce these areas that we need to improve our safety.
It does look like the one question that we've received already, Bill did answer in the chat pod, so I'll read those out. And then, Joseph, if you have anything further you'd like to add to it, I'll let you do that as well. The question was from Weld County Public Works, and they said, what I hear from many residents is that we want more officers issuing speeding tickets and more stoplights. Could you comment on what you'd tell these residents? And so Bill put that the one thing that has helped them at the state level minimize politics was using crash data to develop the strategic plan. When the data showed where the top crash-prone locations associated were, if those locations did not show up on those lists, it empowered management to remain focused on the priorities rather than on those requests. So Joseph, do you have any other comments as well?
I guess I can provide a brief statement. So I used to do a lot of work with the Safe Routes to School initiatives, and that was probably the most common complaint we've received is speeding through school areas where school children were walking. And, you know, one of the ways we combated that was, you know, instead of sending out the officers to, you know, just start writing a whole slew of tickets and aggravating the community, you know, getting involved in the politics, as Bill mentioned, you know, one of the things that we did was we actually mounted some of the those "Your Speed Is" sign, the speed sentry equipment, and we try to do a little, you know, pre-campaigning on those streets, you know, help show motorists that they are speeding, show that there is a police presence. We would do that for like a week or so, kind of give them a warning, if you will. Then we would actually put officers out there, and we would crack down, not necessarily by issuing tickets, but we would pull over motorists and issue them warnings. That's one of the strategies. You know, everyone always has a speeding problem on their road, at least in New Jersey. I could say that. You know, really working and engaging with the law enforcement community, using crash data, you know, having an officer out there, high visibility enforcement. These are the types of strategies that help bring down those problems without having to just write tickets upon tickets.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not look like we've received any other questions, so I'm going to move us back over to our presentation, and we'll turn it over to Craig when that does load. Okay, Craig, all set for you.
Well, I'd say good morning, but I guess for both folks on the East Coast, it just turned noon. I'm glad to be here, and especially it's been interesting listening to Bill and to Joseph and the things that they've had to say, and I would echo many of the things that they already have been talking about. I am not, I'm not able to advance the slides. There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about road safety audits or road safety assessments, road safety impact claims. There's a lot of different terminology as far as that, but I'll refer to it mostly as RSAs. And when I look at RSAs and when we talk about RSAs, there's several things that I think about. First of all, a multidisciplinary team. And I need some help here. I cannot advance the slides. I do not have any details here. Thank you. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what the data doesn't tell us. Both Bill and Joe have both talked about the data and the importance of data, and I agree with that. But I'd like to give you a little bit of information that why it's so vital to have law enforcement involved in what we're attempting to do. And that is plan for safety, design for safety, build for safety, and make it safer. If you can advance the slide again. The plot maps, or these hot maps, give us a lot of good information. Go ahead. But there's also problems with those. Go ahead. Because it really doesn't tell us unless you have good information that is coming in. And I think Joseph said garbage in, garbage out. If you look at this slide, let me give you a little bit of background on officer training. And that is when an officer is green, where they come in as a rookie. And I tell you this from experience, not only having been that rookie, but also teaching rookies. What they're taught to do is go to a crash site, and Joseph mentioned this before, stabilize that site. But there's some basic questions that are asked. First of all, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? Driver's license, registration, and then having the driver separated, what happened? Now, the problem with this is that what happened, the officers are trained in a large part to look at what is the violation. They're not looking at necessarily what happened in the crash, what were the other causations. But as soon as they can find out that causation or that violation of law, my first sergeant would put back a crash report that I would do if I did not have a ticket that was, or a citation that was attached to it. And as a result of that, I can remember a car deer crash coming in where this little lady the deer basically ran into the side of her car. And I ended up citing the deer because I knew that crash report would come back. It's a huge problem because what happens, and if you'll advance the slide, what happens when you look at the catch-all? What's the easiest way to prove the driver was at fault or violated the law? And what I'd like to do is ask you a question at this time. Your agency's kind of catch-all violation, do you know what's used? The law enforcement generally use one of these areas for a crash and saying, if you crashed, you violated one of these laws. And so go ahead and vote. Okay, they voted?
They have. I've broadcast the results. You should see those now.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting to me because when you look at those are violations that really, what do they tell you? Okay, you can see they go a broad spectrum here, but most of it is speed too fast for conditions. Can you pull the slides back up, please? That speed too fast for existing conditions, and I'll just use that as an example. What does that really tell you? That's a citation that is often given if you have rain on the road, snow on the road, ice on the road, and even though you're going slower than what the posted speed limit is, if you lost control, then you're driving at a speed too fast for existing conditions. When that comes into the data, oftentimes that comes back as speeding. And so we need to go back and say, do we really have a speeding problem out here, especially if the crashes are occurring in inclement weather? So you look at here, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. Oftentimes, if I ask an officer, say it'll be A, and that is driver error or stupid. Go ahead and move the slide, please. Let's talk about clusters or hotspots. If you have locations where you have a lot of crashes, go ahead and advance the slide twice if you would. Either you have a whole lot of stupid people or you have some kind of a recurring road issue or challenge. Now, if you're looking at the police data, oftentimes what they'll tell you is we just have the human factors or the stupidity. But those clusters oftentimes, experience that I've had going around the country, is that we have something that is contributing or maybe contributing to those crashes, that the officer is really not looking beyond just who violated the law. Go ahead, please. We look at the crash data, and most commonly we look at the human factors as responsible for 95% of the crashes. The reality of that is there's often a lack of that interface. You see the green interface of the roadway environment with the human factors. Go ahead and advance it, please. I like to dumb things down a little bit. And so I talk about what I call the theory of the dead rat. Go ahead and move it forward. Years ago, I was in Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii, and they had a large building that we were going to have a workshop in. There were thousands of boxes in this room, basically because they were redoing the offices, and they had all the files and the personal items from the desk. When we went in there, and I'm sure you've all had the experience of in the summertime, how an animal that's dead festers up and it gets very, very stinky. When we walked in that room, that's what we had, is we had a dead animal in that room. Now, there was not another location that we could have that workshop, so what we had to do is make the best of it. I had some of the people in the class open the windows, get fans. We had one of the people go down and get some spray to make it smell pretty, and then the rest of us spread out looking around these boxes, and we found the dead mongoose. Took the mongoose out, and as we took it out, then what we could do is start tackling the problem. So go to the next slide, please. The theory of the dead rat has three components. First of all, smell it. When we walked in, we knew there was a problem because we can smell it. But smelling a problem on our roadways and knowing we have a problem, you're not done. You need to go to the next step. And the next step is you need to find it. Locating the problem or figuring out what the problem is great, but then you have the third step, which is basically what? Yes, you need to fix it. So move to the next slide, please. If you have a good team, what you find is you can start developing that and understanding that. Example from law enforcement that oftentimes you will not see on the crash reports, and that is the idea of locals versus non-locals. Go ahead and scroll through this fairly quick. Locals tend to be more aggressive. They tend to know where the problem areas are. They tend to also know where the law enforcement sits, where they do their enforcement. Non-locals tend to drive slower. They tend to be more of the sightseers, unsure of the area, and maybe the first and last time they're in that area. As a result, if we go to the next slide and go ahead and scroll through it, what we find is education for locals is much more valuable. Where you have the non-locals, that education, if they're just driving through, you're going to have a very difficult time getting that education. Enforcement, good engineering, and EMS are very, very vital. But if we go to the next slide, I'll give you an example of that. And that is when you look at the data, and just scroll through this quickly, what you find is very similar to what the other two speakers have talked about. There's roles for the law enforcement and data. Going to the next slide, when we look at data corrections, we need to do the data mining. Are we looking at 3 years, 5 years worth of data? The value of having law enforcement in the planning and in the interfacing with you as the public works and DOTs, designers and planners, is that they can determine that there may be a problem developing much quicker than what we can do with the data oftentimes. Go ahead to the next slide. Joseph mentioned the DDAX, and go ahead and go through those slides, and he did a great idea of it. This is an example down in Florida where it was just very, very, the overlaps between the criminal activity and also the traffic crashes was very, very, had a very good, strong correlation. Go ahead to the next slide, please. What I'd ask you is most of you use computers or phones that have passwords on. How often, if you just miss a digit, if you don't get your password right, what happens? Probably the most common answer would be is you just don't get in. And so what I'd look at is the RSA, and especially this multidisciplinary team, is a way of getting that password right and being able to coordinate better. Go ahead. I like the term, see something, say something. That's Homeland Security, and they're talking that direction. But with the law enforcement, very, very similar. Go ahead. Impaired driving, it was mentioned earlier. You don't go out and do impaired driving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You do it when the data tells you that. Next slide. If you look at, for example, pedestrian statistics, this data can be very, very valuable. It's mentioned earlier. The idea of when do you go out? Where do you go out? When do you do the enforcement? How do you do the enforcement? Pedestrians, for example, are raising in the numbers of the percentages of our fatalities and serious injuries. However, what we find is a lot of the pedestrian activities during the daytime, when we find that many of those are during the night. Go ahead. 78%, for example, one state, were at nighttime. Next slide. A lot of areas have areas where you have a lot of transient population. The problem with the transient population is how do you deal with them? A lot of pedestrian issues, a lot of criminal activity. And so what we want to do is focus these resources. Go ahead and move along on this one. The idea, and you've seen this before, the educational, the enforcement, engineering, the EMS strategies. If you were able to find that there were problems or that things were not working like you would like them as transportation professionals, then what it does is it gives you an opportunity to figure that out quicker when you're using these multidisciplinary teams. Next slide. One of the things that we have been pushing and are starting to push especially this year is the idea of engineering basics for non-engineers, where we talk to the law enforcement and first responders of different areas, different issues of traffic engineering. Help them understand some very, very basics, things like sight triangle, basic signal operation. Helping them look beyond just who broke the law, who violated the law. Next slide. FHWA has been pushing proven safety countermeasures. Again, these are things that we know, we've proven that they work well, that can help out with these traffic crashes and these problems that we have. Pushing these and saying to the law enforcement, is this a way we can make RSAs or make it work better? Go ahead and the next slide. So the key here is, how can we make our roads safer? Well, one of the ways that several states have been looking at is just that, a law enforcement workshop. Go ahead to the next slide, please. With the idea that it's 2-day, free, the idea to help the law enforcement understand, very similar to what Bill and what Joseph are doing, help them understand what their piece of the puzzle is and have them understand beyond just having a crash report or just a violation. Are there similarities? Are there issues that need to be brought to the attention of Public Works and our designers and our planners? So this is a workshop that we are pushing for the next couple of years, the idea of bringing the law enforcement and first responders in. Next slide, please. Again, to make our RSAs and make things work better, law enforcement, our first responders are out there 24 hours a day. It amazes me how often there are problems that our law enforcement first responders are aware of, but have not found an avenue to really convey that to the folks that can make a difference on it. Examples, locations where law enforcement is actually staging, paramedics are staging at certain times of the day or the afternoon or rush hours, just waiting for the crashes to occur because they know at a particular intersection they're going to have crashes every day. Well, if that were communicated to you, would that make it easier and help you out? Go ahead and advance slide. Mentioned things like traffic signals, next slide. Focusing those resources. That is the real key of the RSA. And if you haven't been working with your law enforcement, I would highly encourage that you start working with them or look at potential maybe bringing this training to them. Go ahead and head a slide. What the goal here is to hit the right target. And Bill and Joseph have done a great job in giving you some information that way. Next slide. And with that, I am done.
Thank you very much, Craig. And for everybody else, there are a couple additional resources here as well. There is the link to the webpage for FHWA's RSAs, and then also the contact information again for that 2-day workshop to get in touch with Craig. At this point, we will take questions again. I do see that there is one in the chat pod that I'll read out in just a second, but we do have one more poll question for you guys. Collaboration with law enforcement and first responders in the planning and design on an existing roadway can greatly enhance safety by utilizing the data they collect, inviting them to planning meetings to share their boots-on-the-ground knowledge and human factors expertise, and by providing data analysis to help focus resources. True or false?
While they're voting there, can I answer Sam's question or comment on Sam's question?
Absolutely. So let me read that out. Sam's question was, do police have any difficulty in identifying the infrastructure and traffic control devices possibly responsible for or associated with the accident? For instance, shoulder drop-offs or non-visible pavement markings, no signs. Go ahead, Craig.
Yes. Realizing that law enforcement, and when you're looking at this crash data, you're going to have officers that are very, very sharp, accident reconstructionists who are very highly trained. But you're also going to have law enforcement that may fill out a crash report once a year, maybe twice a year, or maybe once every couple of years. So you're going to have varying levels of expertise. Most law enforcement are looking again, and I think a great example of this is that shoulder drop-off. A shoulder drop-off, because of the liability issues and because of how law enforcement is trained, probably will not even be mentioned on a crash report. What they would be looking at is failure to maintain control or improper driving. That violation really wouldn't draw back to help you understand that there's an edge drop-off problem, that there's issues there. Traffic control devices. We've become so sophisticated in our signal timing that different areas of different states, even within states, are using lead, lag, lag, lead, lag, lag, lead. I mean, and oftentimes the law enforcement have a difficult time understanding if a signal is not even operating properly. Looking at issues of sight triangles, that's what we're trying to address in these workshops, is have them have eyes and ears and just think, do I need to go talk to our county engineer or to our city engineer or our engineering or public works department? That's really what the goal is.
I have a thought also. This is Bill Baines. When we do our road safety audits, we invite officers out. So we bring a team of engineers, officers. We may bring even some local officials. We've even brought people from the local community out on a road safety audit. And I teach the officers this. I tell them, I said, look, the engineers are in the building. They're looking at data. They're looking at a paper drawing of the roadway features. Nothing, it doesn't beat to have somebody from the field who knows what's going on. So we go out there, the officers, they'll just tell us this. I'll tell you what somebody's doing right now. They're going down here, they're cutting a corner there, and they're coming out over here. And the engineers get a fuller picture. So I know with our road safety audits, we include the officers. Regarding the crash report and documenting certain sub-features, I think that's a good idea, and I may actually talk about that and include that in training in the future, is to encourage them to make some notes if they see something and be able to phrase it out. So I'll see about incorporating that in training in the future. So thank you for that comment.
SGI also said sometimes the police, when at an accident site, they could indicate it as property damage only. It turns out the victim may have been injured. What can be done to improve the assessment of injuries at the crash site? That's a big goal right now because of the requirement on serious injuries. And this is something very difficult for many of the states because they're not using a common judging scale at that point. The idea of crash reporting, and that's already been brought up by, I believe, by Bill and Joseph Bowe. Last week, I was in a location in a community where only fatalities and serious injuries are investigated. We had a very difficult time on the road safety audit there to really determine where the problems were because we were lacking so much data, so it can be very, very tough.
And I could actually add to that a little bit. So I've seen in the past cases where the officer will downplay the injury for whatever reason, and so instead of identifying the person as incapacitated or seriously or moderately injured, they might document them as moderately injured or complaints of pain. I do know, actually being in a serious car crash and being seriously injured myself, that the effects of pain and the effects of injury are actually delayed based off of adrenaline and things along those lines. So in my particular case, I was actually marked down for a complaint of pain, and I ended up being hospitalized for 7 days. So, you know, was the officer wrong in making that determination? Well, no, because I was coherent, I was speaking, I walked myself into the back of the ambulance, but later, due to internal damages, it resulted in more serious injuries. I know that NHTSA has released guidance on changing the scale, the injury scale, the CADCO scale, to now, instead of being defined as killed, incapacitated, moderate injury, complaints of pain, it's now killed, suspected serious injury, suspected moderate injury, and suspect of minor injury. And so I think one of the reasons behind that is to, instead of, you know, you're enabling the officer to make a more broader judgment because they may suspect that the person is seriously injured or moderately injured versus writing down in stone this person was in fact incapacitated or in fact moderately injured. So I think kind of changing the vocabulary in that injury severity scale is going to enhance our injury data. It's just that's my opinion, and you know, some of the things I've seen kind of working with crash data for 4 years now.
Yeah, and on top of that, I know that in Utah, there are several other states that had a codes project through, it was actually sponsored through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And what we found in Utah is a third of the non-injury crashes ended up seeking medical attention within 3 days. So very, very common. Puerto Rico LTAP also had a comment. It was very good, and I believe it's the Puerto Rico LTAP. Would photography of crash scene be effective strategy to incorporate, enhance completeness of crash reports with the portable electronic devices? And he also mentions the fact that latitude and longitude, for example, on a lot of the phones, gives some good information. And absolutely, it was mentioned earlier about what the idea of law enforcement has generally, why they do crash reports. The idea of getting that exact location is so vital to us on the hard side. And on the soft side, we didn't see it nearly as important.
Thank you, everyone, for all the great questions and answers. I did move us back over to the presentation because we are nearing the end, and I do want to allow our Bill to go ahead through the last section. Everyone did get the right answer for that poll, so that's why I did leave the poll question. So I am going to turn it over to Bill so he can finish up our presentation for today. Bill?
Right. Thank you. So again, I started the whole program here with TZD and told you how that came about and what's been going on with that. Then I talked about law enforcement and addressing their perception as it relates to safety in the highway system. And as you can see, there are some short-sightedness there when 90-some% says it's a legal document. And then, of course, Joe went on and talked about the data components, and then Craig went on and talked about including law enforcement and going over some of the different programs that are out there for them to get involved in and hopefully buy into this vision that they're an important component of a team of players. So now what I want to talk about here is the safety culture. And you'll see this statement here from AAA. We need to transform our culture from a culture that accepts loss of life and limb as a price of mobility to one which elected officials, transportation professionals, that's all of us, engineers, enforcement, education, so on, and individual citizens expect safety, demand safety, refuse to accept the annual casualty count roughly equal to the population of Arkansas. So this is AAA's statement about safety culture and the need to change and address this. Definition of safety culture: shared values, actions, behaviors. So this is what's very important, because we just talked about the officers' perception of safety and their buying in with a misconception in their mind that it was an insurance document. So you see the culture, if 99% answer that way, it's a litigation document, that even within the realm of us safety professionals, we have a misconception of values, of shared values. When we discuss law enforcement collaboration opportunities, we have to understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with mindsets. Here's what we're dealing with. In the public, as well as us as professionals, we're dealing with people, perceptions, behaviors, expectations. All of those are shaped by experiences, culture, and belief systems. We are looking at something that is fundamentally complicated, not as easy to break through, because, see, traditional methods of addressing safety, go fix the curb, click it or ticket, give them a ticket for not having a seatbelt on, which manufacturers have done a great job with improving vehicular safety, they only go so far because they're not addressing the mindset of people, law enforcement's mentality, the public, right? You have a few bad instances, maybe a couple officers that might have acted inappropriate at a certain event, and the public perceives as negative. Now their life experience, their culture and beliefs are now shaped and formed by media presenting that one, let's call it a bad apple, we don't know, but, you know, go through, let's say it was a bad apple, one officer that did an inappropriate action, but it taints entire societies. We're looking at how to move people's minds, belief systems, as they relate to safety. So it's very complicated. So here we see the safety culture, we need a paradigm shift. You see a traffic safety culture paradigm. It's a process of changing values and attitudes so that the safety is part of every transportation decision, but even more than that, about individuals. You know, changing values. How do I change individuals' values, perceptions, experiences? And this is very key and important as we go forward as a team, a group of us, engineers, police officers, educators. I think we've made a great headway on our traditional work. Probably one of the, that could use the most, let's say, improvement would be education. What are we doing to educate the public, society, regarding these issues? AAA has turned around and developed an index that, in the 08, that could begin to measure, listen to what it measures, knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and experiences. So, again, you may want to look this up, the AAA's Safety Culture Index, so you could get a feel for what is going on as far as the public relating to safety, because it's going to be a big impact whether or not we can continue working towards zero, is to be able to modify and have people change some of their belief systems, which are predicated upon experiences, cultures, and beliefs. So it's not an easy measure. For instance, we're competing against all kinds of other programs that are looking to get people's attentions, right? So here you have climate change, you have suicide, animal cruelty, domestic violence, body issues. It's all personal, it's all terrible. These movements are vying to change the public's belief systems, perceptions regarding the importance of these issues. It is not easy because you've always heard the statement, not in my backyard. Do you speed down other roads, but you don't speed down yours? So you may be somebody who's challenged. This domestic violence doesn't affect me. It's not in my household. Okay, but what's your relationship to that on a national level, or to understand other people do go through that? You see what I'm saying? So what is your relationship to the highway system yourself? And to be able to change people's emotions and perceptions and beliefs. This is our challenge, because we come in with traffic safety culture. Now, they each have an individual one. They say domestic violence. We come in with a safety culture that turns around and says, I want to look at vehicles, I want to look at education, I want to look at the way we drive the cars, our SEPA. So it's vast, and it includes many facets and components to traffic safety and the traffic safety culture that we're trying to address. So again, it comes down to a collaboration, but safety culture is at the center. Traditional means are going to take us so far, and they've been good. The auto industry has done great in saving lives. Police enforcement has done great. Seatbelt usage is up. That's fantastic. So traditional methods are good, but this safety culture needs to be addressed, because when people really begin to care and embrace that they are part of a bigger whole, that my neighbor who I don't necessarily know, or somebody in the city I don't necessarily know, or out on a highway I don't necessarily know, but their life is valuable as well as mine, then maybe I'd be a little more cautious the way I react and relate to them. So we got to look at our organizations, whether you're from the police organization, state level, federal level. How are we marketing the way we come across to people? Officers are boots on the ground, and they have probably one of the most successful efforts to be able to show that they are kind, caring, loving, that they care for people. It's not always easy when they're in your face, but the point is your response, the way you relate to them and the public, the message you're communicating directly and indirectly by body language, eyesight, touch, comments, are changing people's perceptions. So even if we get the one or two negative media events that did have a mega effect, the boots on the ground are more. There's thousands upon thousands of officers, boots on the ground, and their daily interaction with the public does have a positive effect on that public. I'm going to leave it there. There's many things that we could address. We're out of time. I just want to thank everybody for participating. Hope you enjoyed the program. Here's a bunch of links for you guys to access and check out. Any thoughts or questions? Dana, Jamie?
Great. Thank you guys very much. It looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat pod, so I am just going to finish up the webinar. In this webinar today, you have learned to restate the idea of Towards Zero Deaths and Road to Zero, to summarize the importance of law enforcement and crash reporting, to illustrate how to incorporate law enforcement into the planning process, and to identify collaboration opportunities for public awareness. We do have some upcoming webinars. They are all listed on the Safety Center's website. The next one is September 14th. It will be done by FHWA on their Safety Data and Analysis Toolbox. The one in October will be on the Safety Center's new Rural ITS Toolkit. November is still to be decided, but December will be the Culture of Swedish Vision Zero. So we hope you'll join us for those. As always, this is being recorded and will be available on our website by next week. We do also have a few training videos on our website. And I will leave up the contact information here for our three speakers. I do want to thank them again, Bill Beans from MBO Engineering, Joseph Weiss from Rutgers, and Craig Allred from FHWA. Thank you all three of you for your excellent presentations and expertise today. I think we all learned a lot, and we do appreciate you taking the time to present for us.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Okay, bye.